Cable number 6 is chapter 19 in Marvel's Ten of Swords 22-part event, the final chapter before the 3-part finale is released the week of Thanksgiving 2020. After Cable and Gorgon get their featured moments, we get our setup for the event's conclusion. Today I'll answer, what are the Quiet Council's plans for war with Arakko? What wheels has Cable set in motion with his parents Cyclops and Jean Grey? Whether Gorgon got the moment he deserved, and theories and predictions for what's to come in X-Men. Hey everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor-in-chief of comicbookherald.com. You are listening to Krakin Krakoa number 120, the third part in the Ten of Swords event coverage that I've done today. You can check out the full playlist in the show notes. If you like the Comic Book Herald YouTube channel or Krakin Krakoa, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting here to have a conversation about the comics and the world of X-Men. Spoilers for discussed comics may follow. Sinister warns the Council in this issue that Arakko will flood into Krakoa and they should destroy any gate connections to Otherworld before they lose everything. Now, having seen in Helion's number 6, the issue prior to this, Mr. Sinister's journey to the nation, he does know of what he speaks in that basically the X-Men seem to, be on the path to losing. Although, to defend some of the X-Men here that are in Otherworld, Sinister didn't actually see the tournament necessarily, right? So, like, his actions here, again, as with most things Sinister, are more about what he wants than about what is actually good for mutant kind. The Quiet Council, though, is pretty clueless, right? Like, Krakoa and the Quiet Council are badly unprepared, I think, for what is actually happening in the Otherworld, this battle, this tournament that's going on between the mutants of Arakko and the Krakoan mutants that were sent there. I think one thing that is interesting to me, too, is, like, Moira McTaggart, who we know to be, the ringleader here and the mastermind behind all of what's going on with the X-Men, she's content to let it all fall for this, for this war. I mean, I'm beating a dead horse trying to get Moira in the picture now. I don't think she's going to show up in this event. We're almost done. But just consider that she's on possibly her last life of her 10 lifelines. And if Krakoa falls to an invading army from a hell dimension, that's kind of a problem, Like, that kind of puts a snafu on whatever they were actually planning. So it's bizarre to me that she wouldn't be more actively involved. Now, maybe she is, and it's all behind the scenes stuff that'll get revealed later, potentially, but it would have made a lot of sense to include that here. Instead, we just get very clueless Professor X having no idea what's happening in Otherworld, and that's kind of, a feature. Another point to Sinister's warning. Let's say Krakoa wins the tournament. Let's say they actually win. Do we expect Annihilation and the hordes of Amenth to turn around and walk home? Even with Saturnine's power in Otherworld, which is immense, and her general control of the situation so far, the kingdom of Dryador in Otherworld already fell to the armies of Arakko. Saturnine can't actually ward off a full Amenth invasion by herself, or at least that's the implication of doing this tournament idea in the first place. She's making the mutants fight for their land so that the mutants don't destroy her own, which is Otherworld. So I don't really expect Arakko and Amenth to just go away. Again, I think best case is Arakko and Krakoa are reunited to bring the one land Okara back to a fully joined life of all mutants. But even if that happens, something still needs to be done about Annihilation and the hordes of Amenth, not to mention the vile mutant hybrids and the summoners of that land. So in the challenges, in the tourney, Cable does have an actual sword fight here with Bei the Blood Moon, the recent partner by marriage of Doug Ramsey. The tone of Cable in this issue, here we have Gerry, Duggan, and Phil Noto creating, returns us more or less to the drama of Creation and Stasis, kind of the event bookends, after 4 to 5 straight issues, tie-in issues, of a sudden comedic tone and general madness to the logic of the tournament. So Cable, in his fight, he has the upper hand, but he flinches, and he doesn't kill Bei, and Doug then has to stop Bei the Blood Moon from killing Cable. She still breaks his arm while defeating him and leaving him in the mud. So Cable reaches out. He basically calls home from summer camp and is like, Mom, Dad, I'm having a bad time. Jean and Scott, they vow to go help Nathan, right? They're concerned about what is happening to their son. Saturnine, she knows Cable's reaching out, actually communicating to Krakoa, which is one of the first times this has happened, and she intervenes, although only after he has reached out successfully. One of my favorite aspects of young Cable in this book is simply that we get to see Scott and Jean act like parents in a way they generally haven't been allowed to in ongoing X-Men continuity, save a mini-series here or there. I theorized previously that Jean and Scott may have been infected by the Veskora back in the first Cable tie-in to the event, that mysterious alien race that had inhabited the Sword Space Station, but given their dialogue and motives here, Scott and Jean's, that seems less likely. I do wonder what comes next for them, though, right? They're vowing to go to Otherworld somehow to help their son. I'm still pushing for Cyclops unleashing the Sword Station and an army of Vescora on Otherworld as this kind of wild card out to save the day for the mutants. So in the next challenge we get the White Sword versus Gorgon, and the White Sword here, he doesn't just fight him straight up. Instead, he sends his 100 swords first against Gorgon before actually, deigning to fight him himself. It's clearly a stacked deck against Gorgon, who valiantly succeeds about as much as any of the X-Men could, save maybe Wolverine, slaying 13 of the White Sword's army before succumbing eventually himself. White Sword offers to make Gorgon one of his new swords, but grants him a clean death after Gorgon refuses and says he could not be someone's pawn. All in all, it's a really strong moment and death for Gorgon as a character. I'd say easily the strongest of any of the characters who have quote-unquote died so far. Shouts to Summoner. But I do feel like Gorgon should have had more of a build-up throughout the comics leading to this moment. I mean, if you're a longtime comics reader from Wolverine Enemy of the State to Hickman Secret Warriors, you know this character, to some degree, but if you're purely a Hickman-era X-Men reader, there hasn't been a lot of time getting to know him. So because of Saturnine's wacky scoring system, Gorgon dies, evening the score for Krakoa and Arakko. So he gets a point for all those 13 swords that he killed, setting up a tiebreaker between Apocalypse and Annihilation/Genesis. Now, we don't know what form Saturnine's tournament will take for the star-crossed lovers, Apocalypse and his wife here, but I have a hard time imagining it'll be another dance-off, right? Like, it's pretty likely it's going to be violent and involve their swords. And everything we've seen from Genesis implies she can defeat Apocalypse in a sword fight. She's been shown as more powerful despite all of Apocalypse's power. So honestly, I'd be surprised if he wins outright. I'd expect a last-second save from an outside source, like I mentioned previously with Cyclops, Jean, and the Vescora. But let's say Apocalypse does win. I think he'll need to claim the Annihilation Helm. Something needs to be done with the hordes of Amenth and with the Arakko mutants following Annihilation. But there's no reason to believe Apocalypse would be able to control the helm when Genesis wasn't really able to hold its hunger at bay, right? Like, it clearly consumes whoever is wearing it. My guess is Apocalypse sacrifices himself knowing this to the Annihilation Helm and Amenth and allows for Genesis and his remaining children who have survived this tournament to make their way to Krakoa. That's my best guess. That's the sacrifice I think might be coming for Apocalypse. Next week, this event will come to a close, and even as someone who would rate it as mostly good, like a B- probably, I'm very ready for it to end. Not only because it will resolve what all this was for, or at least I hope it will, but because it also allows for a return to the absolute greatest thing about the post-House of X Powers of 10 landscape in X-Men: possibility. House and Powers were so remarkably captivating because the big ideas and stories created remarkable possibility for the world of X-Men and Marvel's mutants. And while there's really good stuff in Ten of Swords, I particularly love the addition of the Arakko mutants, the Apocalypse Genesis origins, and the lore of Amenth, I don't think I'm really saying anything too dramatic asserting it has not lived up to the hype and possibility of how the Hickman era started. This event was long, and it felt long, and it's time for a return to the possibilities of Krakoa and truly new X-Men stories in whatever new form that may take after this event. So coming up next week, we have Excalibur, then X-Men, issues 15 of each, and then the Destruction finale, and then this event is done. So we'll see how it all ends. The Krakoan for the next issue, which will be Excalibur, reads Asunder, which is, of course, a reference to Apocalypse and Genesis, his wife, being torn asunder way back when Okara was split in two. So let me know what you think about the event so far. We're coming up on the conclusion. What are your theories for how it ends? What did you think of Gorgon's last stand here? And, you think the role of Jean and Scott might be coming up in the Ten of Swords event? Let me know in the comments here. I would love to hear and discuss with you there. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Again, you can find my stuff at comicbookherald.com. You can find ways to support the site and Krakin Krakoa at patreon.com/comicbookherald. One feature that I consistently forget to mention is that if you would rather get these reviews in podcast form, or if that is occasionally useful to you, I post the big ones over on Best Comics Ever, which is my podcast for Comic Book Herald, but I post all the issue-by-issue reviews to the Patreon feed exclusively. So if you're interested in that, you can get that for support for as little as $1 a month. Thanks in particular to the Mysterious Benefactors tier for your generous support of the work here. I'm Dave. Again, look for the Best Comics Ever and My Marvelous Year podcast for more from me, and you can find me at Comic Book Herald pretty much anywhere online. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and as always, enjoy the comics.